At 9:41 p.m. on March 12, 2016, Valeria Torres sent a voice message to her mother. She said someone might be following her. It was the last time anyone heard from her. On the evening of March 12, 2016, a Saturday, Valeria Torres finished her shift at Boutique Elisa at 8:40 p.m., walked out of the Plaza San Aurelio Commercial Center, and began the commute home that she had made dozens of times before. The route was 3 bus stops. The trip took, under normal circumstances, between 20 and 25 minutes. At 9:18 p.m., she sent her mother a text message. She was on her way. At 9:41 p.m., she sent a voice message saying she thought someone was following her. She never arrived home. In the hours and days that followed, investigators working the case would note that nothing about that Saturday night had looked unusual from the outside. There were no alerts, no disturbances reported, just a young woman making an ordinary commute at the end of an ordinary shift, on a Saturday evening like any other. She was 22 years old. She studied psychology at the Universidad de Guadalajara, in her 3rd year of a 5-year degree. She worked part-time at a clothing store in a commercial plaza 3 bus stops from her house. She lived with her parents. She was, by every account from everyone who knew her, unremarkably, consistently, precisely herself, a person who kept a schedule, who came home when she said she would come home, who called her mother when she was going to be late. She had never been late before March 12, 2016. Her father, Ramon Torres, drove a delivery route for a regional food distributor. Early mornings, back by early afternoon, the kind of job that structures an entire household around its timing. He had held the same position for 11 years. He was not the kind of man who spoke easily to journalists, and he did not, in the months and years after March 2016, give many interviews. When he did speak, it was in the particular language of someone who has compressed an enormous thing into very few words in order to be able to say it at all. Her mother, Patricia Vega de Torres, Patricia, who everyone called Paddy, was an administrative assistant at a logistics company near the city center. She had worked there for 8 years. She handled invoicing. She was, her colleagues would say, meticulous and reliable. Another kind of person whose desk is organized not as performance, but because organized is simply how she functions. Valeria had inherited this quality. Valeria's room was, by her mother's description, small and organized. She had a desk she used for studying, psychology textbooks stacked in a particular order, yellow sticky notes marking pages, a printed class schedule pinned above the monitor. She had a shelf of notebooks, one for each semester, labeled by subject and date. She had a poster on the wall, a reproduction of a Frida Kahlo painting, one she had bought herself at a market in Tlaquepaque when she was 19. The first time she had gone somewhere alone for an afternoon and returned with something to show for it. She shared the house with her parents and with, occasionally on weekends, her cousin Daniela, her mother's niece, a year younger, who studied at a different campus and came to stay when her own commute was long. Daniela and Valeria had grown up together in a way that made them closer than some sisters. They had similar tastes in music. They had argued at length for most of their adolescence about things that neither of them could afterward remember. They were, by adulthood, past arguing. She was the calm one, Daniela would say in an interview. In any situation, she would wait and think. I was always the one reacting. She'd look at me and just wait for me to finish. She had worked at the clothing store, Boutique Elisa, in the Plaza San Aurelio commercial area, for 14 months, by March 2016. It was a part-time position, weekend shifts, and 2 evenings a week, designed to fit around her university schedule. Her supervisor, a woman named Lorena Aguilar, described her as precise and self-motivated, someone who memorized the inventory without being asked, who arrived early enough to open correctly, who never needed to be reminded of the same thing twice. The job was not Valeria's long-term plan. She was clear about this in the way that people who have a plan are clear about it, not with urgency, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows what the next step is. She was going to finish her degree. She was going to complete a clinical placement. She was going to specialize in adolescent psychology, which was, she had told her mother, the area where she felt most useful. She had researched programs in Guadalajara and in Mexico City. She had a timeline. She kept her timeline in her notebook. On the inside back cover, a handwritten progression of years and objectives, the way someone maps a route before beginning it. That notebook was on her desk when she left for work on March 12th. She had told her mother she would be home by 10. In the days before March 12th, Valeria had noticed something. She had not, at the time, described it as alarming. She had not described it with any particular urgency at all. It came up the way these things do, in passing, in the margins of other conversations, the kind of observation that you file under coincidence, because coincidence is by far the more common explanation. A white pickup truck. She had seen it twice in the space of 4 days, once parked on the street near the family's house, facing the same direction both times. Once idling on the corner near the bus stop she used in the evenings. She mentioned it to her mother on March 9th, 3 days before her disappearance. She said it in the way of someone noting an oddity rather than reporting a concern. "There's a white truck that's always around here," Archie said. Patricia heard this. She would recall it later with the particular clarity of a memory that has been reviewed hundreds of times. The kitchen, afternoon light, the sound of something on the stove, and Valeria at the table with a textbook open, saying it the way you say, "I think it might rain." Patricia had not thought much of it at the time. Neither had Valeria. This is worth considering in context. Guadalajara in early 2016 was a city navigating a period of significant tension in its public security environment. The Western Corridor Network, a cartel-aligned organization, had been expanding its territorial presence across western Mexico since approximately 2013, and Jalisco was its operational base. The city itself was not uniformly dangerous. Large portions of it functioned with the ordinary rhythms of a major metropolitan area. But the peripheral colonias, the residential neighborhoods of the working class, where small businesses operated and where petty extortion had become a parallel economy, were subject to pressures that most of their residents understood at least partially and preferred, where possible, not to examine too directly. A white truck parked near your house was not, in this context, necessarily benign, but it was also not necessarily anything. Most people, in most circumstances, choose the more manageable interpretation. They choose coincidence over threat, because coincidence is livable and threat is not, and because most of the time, in most neighborhoods, the truck is just a truck. Valeria chose coincidence. She was not wrong to do so. She was, as investigators would later carefully note, not doing anything that any reasonable person would not have done in her position with the information she had. She went to work. She came home. She studied. She called her cousin. She went to work on March 12th. 3 p.m. Valeria left the family home on foot carrying a backpack, her work things, a change of shoes, a phone charger. Her mother was in the kitchen. Her father was still on his route. She said goodbye at the door, the ordinary leave-taking of someone who expects to return. Patricia would later recall that she almost asked Valeria to take a taxi home that night instead of the bus. She had been slightly tired, a week that had run long, and the idea had occurred to her. A passing thought, but she did not say it. Between 3:15 and 8:35 p.m. Valeria worked her Saturday shift at Boutique Elisa. This was her standard schedule, 4 to 5 hours, late afternoon and evening, timed around the shopping center's peak foot traffic hours. Her supervisor, Lorena Aguilar, confirmed she had been entirely normal that day, professional, engaged. There had been a sale on knitwear, and the store had been busier than usual. Lorena recalls that Valeria had handled the checkout line efficiently without being asked to jump in. She had mentioned in the staff room during a short break that she had a partial exam on Monday that she was not particularly worried about. She had eaten a small meal, a torta she brought from home. She had texted during the break, though Lorena did not know with whom. The text was to Daniela, a photograph of a sweater with a single-word message, "Este," asking her cousin's opinion on whether to buy it during her employee discount period. Daniela had replied with a thumbs up. It was the last message Valeria sent that was unrelated to what was happening. 8:40 p.m. The security camera at the Plaza San Aurelio commercial exit recorded Valeria leaving the building. The footage shows her clearly, backpack on both shoulders, phone visible in her right hand, walking at a normal pace toward the bus stop on the avenue outside the plaza. Nothing in her gait or posture suggests alarm. She's not hurrying. She's not looking around. 9:10 p.m. A witness at the bus stop, a woman in her 50s who was waiting for the same route and who would later give a statement to investigators, noticed Valeria standing at the stop. The witness did not know Valeria. She could not have, but she remembered her for a specific reason. The white pickup truck was parked on the opposite side of the avenue. The witness noticed it because it was running but stationary, engine on, no one appearing to be waiting to park or leave. She noticed it with the vague attention of someone who has logged something as mildly unusual and then returned to their own business. She did not connect it at the time to the young woman at the bus stop. Valeria, at this point, had presumably seen the truck. Whether she registered what it meant, we cannot know. 9:18 p.m. She sent a text message to her mother, "On my way home." Patricia read it immediately. She replied, "Okay, my baby." She began to prepare dinner. She expected her daughter in approximately 25 minutes. 9:34 p.m. Valeria sent a message to her friend Sofia Renteria. The message read, "The truck passed again." Sofia, Viti, who had not been told about the truck before this message, replied, "What truck?" Valeria did not respond. Sofia would spend years returning to that unanswered message. "I didn't know," she would say in an interview conducted in 2017. "She'd never mentioned it to me. I just thought she'd reply later," and then later never came. 9:41 p.m. The voice message, sent to Patricia, 8 words in Spanish. After 9:41 p.m., Valeria Torres' phone registered no further activity. No calls placed, no messages sent or received, no app activity, no location data. The phone was not turned off at that moment. The record does not suggest a deliberate shutdown. It simply stopped. She never arrived home. Patricia began calling Valeria at 10:05 p.m. when she had not arrived by her expected time. The phone rang. No one answered. She called again at 10:08, at 10:12, at 10:17. At 10:20, she called Sofia Renteria, Valeria's friend, who had received the last message. Sofia confirmed she had heard from Valeria, but not after 9:34. Patricia asked what the message had said. Sofia read it to her. "La camioneta pasó otra vez." Patricia called Ramon, who was home by that hour. She told him. He got in the car. Ramon drove the bus route from the Plaza San Aurelio toward their neighborhood. He stopped at each bus stop along the way. He asked 2 people at one stop if they had seen a young woman matching Valeria's description. One person had not. One person thought perhaps, but was not sure. He drove to the plaza. The parking lot was closing, the commercial center shutting down for the night. He spoke to a security guard at the entrance. The guard had nothing useful to tell him. He drove home at 11:30 p.m. Valeria was not there. They reported her missing to the Fiscalía del Estado de Jalisco at 12:45 a.m. on March 13th. In Mexico, as in many countries, the traditional waiting period before a missing person case is formally opened has been challenged and in many places revised. But in practice, in 2016, in Guadalajara, the process of mobilizing an active investigation still took time. The Torres family was received, their report was taken, and they were told to return in the morning when the day shift investigators would be available. They did not go home to sleep. Ramon drove the route again. Then a longer version of the route. Then a different route. Patricia sat with her sister, who had come across the city when Patricia called her at midnight. They sat in the kitchen. The pot was still on the stove. At 7:30 a.m. on March 13th, Ramon and Patricia returned to the Fiscalía. A formal missing person file was opened. investigators began the process of obtaining security footage from the commercial plaza, the bus route, and the streets between them. They requested Valeria's phone records. They began interviewing witnesses. The process was competent by the standards available to it. It was not fast enough. Nothing could have been fast enough. Investigators worked the security footage carefully. The Plaza San Aurelio cameras confirmed Valeria's exit at 8:40 p.m. The image was clear, good enough to confirm clothing, backpack, phone in hand. A useful starting point. The cameras on the avenue outside were less cooperative. The camera position nearest the bus stop had, in the week before March 12th, developed a partial field obstruction. A delivery vehicle had clipped the housing and shifted the angle slightly, narrowing the view. The footage from that camera on the evening of March 12th showed the bus stop partially, the avenue partially. Enough to confirm the bus stop witness's account of the white pickup, but not enough to capture a license plate. The white pickup appeared in the footage at 9:07 p.m. It entering the frame from the right, from the direction of the plaza. It parked at 9:08 p.m. It remained stationary until 9:39 p.m., when the footage shows it pulling away from the curb. The direction it turns when leaving the frame is the same direction as the bus route toward Valeria's neighborhood. It was not visible after that. Investigators submitted the available footage to technical analysis for vehicle identification. The make and model were tentatively assessed as consistent with a full-size pickup common to the Mexican market, a category that encompasses several 100,000 registered vehicles in Jalisco state. The color was confirmed as white or very light gray. The license plates were not visible in any frame. Whether this was a matter of angle, obstruction, jury, or deliberate concealment, a covered or removed plate could not be definitively determined. The vehicle was never located. The phone records raised their own questions. Valeria's last registered cell tower ping at 9:41 p.m., simultaneous with the voice message to her mother, placed her on a street approximately 500 meters from the bus stop where the witness had seen her. This was consistent with her having taken her usual bus and ridden 2 or 3 stops. After that, the phone went dark. The record showed no attempt to call emergency services, no further messages, no GPS activity. The phone appeared to have been either turned off or physically disabled shortly after the voice message was sent. Investigators considered several theories in the early days of the investigation. A robbery was the first. A phone and a backpack, a young woman alone on a street after 9 p.m. It was a plausible explanation for a quick disappearance, but Valeria's bank cards, 2 debit cards linked to a shared family account, showed no activity after March 12th. A robbery that took only a phone and a bag, leaving financial access untouched, would be unusual. Not impossible. Unusual. And there was the truck. A coincidental robbery does not involve a truck that has been present in the victim's neighborhood for days. A coincidental robbery does not track someone from a commercial plaza along a specific bus route. These things, individually, can be explained away. Together, they begin to form a different shape. Patricia Vega de Torres had one brother. Ricardo Vega was 38 years old in March 2016. He ran a small automotive repair shop in a commercial colonia approximately 4 kilometers from the family home, a business he had opened 8 years earlier with a loan from their parents, which he had repaid and which had since operated at a modest but viable profit. He was unmarried. He had a daughter, Daniela, yes, the same Daniela who was Valeria's close cousin, from a relationship that had ended years before without acrimony. Ricardo was not the kind of figure who appears at the center of investigations. He was, by the account of everyone who knew him, ordinary, skilled at his work, consistent in his routines, a responsible father to Daniela in the limited way that the circumstances of his schedule permitted. In early 2016, Ricardo's shop had begun receiving visits, not from customers. The visits came in the evenings after closing. 2 men, sometimes 3, not always the same faces, but always a consistent message. A weekly payment was required. The neighborhood was being organized. Everyone with a commercial space paid. This was, as the visitors made clear with no particular emphasis, not a request. This practice, the cobro de piso, the floor charge, the extortion tax levied by organized crime on small businesses operating in controlled territories, was not new in Guadalajara in 2016. It had existed in various forms for years. In the colonias where it had become normalized, many business owners paid without formal documentation and without reporting, calculating that the cost of payment was less than the cost of refusal, and that the cost of reporting was incalculable. They paid the way people pay for insurance in countries with unreliable courts, because the alternative is worse, and because the system that should protect them has not in living memory reliably done so. Ricardo paid. He paid through February. Then, at the end of February, he stopped. The shop was struggling. The first months of the year are slow for automotive repair. A regular client had taken their fleet business elsewhere. A parts supplier had raised prices. Ricardo ran the numbers and found that the weekly payment was consuming a margin his business no longer had. He stopped paying the week of February 28th. The messages came quickly. A text to his personal phone, an unregistered number, short, without preamble. Ya sabes lo que pasa cuando no cumples. Ricardo was questioned by investigators 3 weeks after Valeria's disappearance. He disclosed the extortion at that point, fully, as completely as he could reconstruct it. He provided the phone numbers. He provided dates. He told investigators that he had not connected the extortion to Valeria until the moment they asked him about it, and that the connection, when he made it, was something he would not afterward be able to fully describe. The timing was not ambiguous. Payments stopped. February 28th, last threatening message received by Ricardo, March 8th. White truck first observed near Valeria's home, March 8th or 9th. Investigators considered this sequence carefully, and that they could not establish it as definitive causation, could not prove, with the evidence available, that the individuals extorting Ricardo had identified Valeria as a target deliberately, as a mechanism of pressure against her uncle, could not confirm that the white truck was operated by anyone connected to the extortion network, could not confirm, but could not dismiss. We treat this as an active line of inquiry, the lead investigator on the case, identified in official communications only as an agent of the Unidad de Investigación Especializada, would state, with the precision of someone who has been carefully trained in saying the minimum that is accurate. The extortion network was not identified. The individuals who had visited Ricardo's shop were not located. The phones were prepaid and inactive. Ricardo Vega was never charged with any crime. He cooperated fully with investigators, by all accounts. He closed his shop in April 2016 and did not reopen it. Daniela, his daughter and Valeria's cousin, moved back to Guadalajara from her university accommodations to be with her father. He doesn't talk about it, Daniela said in an interview in 2017. Not once. I think he will never talk about it. And I think I understand that. At 7:14 a.m. on March 13, 2016, Ricardo Vega received a phone call. He had been at the family home since after midnight when Ramon had called him. He was in the kitchen with Ramon and Patricia when the call came. An unknown number, prepaid it would later be confirmed. A male voice. He described it afterward as calm, not a raised voice, not aggressive in tone, informational. The call was brief. The caller said, "We have your niece." Then, "You have 24 hours." The call ended. No amount was specified on that call, no account number, no drop location, just the fact and the timeline. Information, not instruction. Ricardo stood in the kitchen with the phone in his hand. Ramon looked at him. Patricia looked at him. He told them what the call had said. Patricia would later describe that moment in one sentence. "Everything I had been hoping was not true became true." Ricardo spent the hours that followed attempting to gather money. He called everyone he trusted, his remaining friends from his business contacts, a former employer, a neighbor who he knew had savings. The conversations were necessarily vague. He could not say what the money was for or rather he could not say it fully, because saying it fully made it real in a way he needed to delay for as long as possible. He said he needed help urgently. He said it was a family matter. People who care about a person, when that person says it is a family emergency, and their voice is the way Ricardo's voice was that morning, usually try to help. What he was able to gather was not close to sufficient. There had been no amount specified. He did not know what sufficient meant in this context. He did not know if any amount would have mattered. He reported the call to investigators that morning. The investigators were already working the case. They received the information and added it to what they had. At 11:47 p.m. on March 13th, just over 26 hours after Valeria had sent her voice message, and after the stated 24-hour window had passed, Ricardo received a second call. Same type of number, probably the same voice, though in his distress he could not be certain. The second call was shorter than the first. The caller said, "Ya se acabó el tiempo." Time's up. The call ended. After that second call on the night of March 13th, there was no further contact, no third call, no demands. No further communication of any kind from the numbers used in the two calls. Both numbers went permanently inactive within hours of the second call. Ricardo waited. The family waited. Investigators continued working. Valeria did not come home. On July 14th, 2016, 4 months after Valeria Torres sent her last voice message, workers conducting a routine clearing operation on a rural property approximately 40 kilometers south of Guadalajara discovered human remains. The discovery was reported to municipal authorities, who forwarded it to the Fiscalía. Forensic examination was conducted over several days. The remains were compared against the records held for Valeria Torres, DNA samples submitted by the family in March, dental records provided by their family dentist, physical descriptors on file. The identification was confirmed on July 19, 2016. The cause of death was assessed as consistent with homicide. No further details are disclosed here. Patricia and Ramon were notified on the afternoon of July 19th. Daniela was at the family home when the investigators arrived. She would describe the scene only once in a 2018 interview, and then she said she would not describe it again. "My uncle and my aunt," she said. "That's all I want to say about that." The investigators conducting the notification told the family that the case remained active, that the investigation was ongoing, that they would be kept informed. These are things that investigators tell families because they are true, because they are required, and because at that moment there is nothing else to offer. The investigation into the disappearance and death of Valeria Torres remained formally active through the end of 2016 and into 2017. Between the prepaid phones used in the two calls to Ricardo Vega, the kidnapping calls of March 13th, were traced through the carrier's network data as far as they could be traced. Both numbers had been purchased in cash at a convenience store, paid for without identification. They had been activated on March 12th and deactivated on March 13th. The cell towers they had connected to during the two calls placed the caller in a broad area of southern Guadalajara, consistent with a large neighborhood covering tens of thousands of residents. Not specific enough to be actionable. The white pickup truck appeared in no further camera footage after the night of March 12th. It was not located in traffic registry checks or through the vehicle identification attempts run from the security footage. The investigation notes record, without elaboration, that the plates were likely false or removed. Valeria Torres was 22 years old. She disappeared from Guadalajara on the night of March 12, 2016, while traveling the 3 bus stops between her job and her home. She had worked a full shift that day. She had made plans for the following Monday. Her class schedule was still pinned above her desk. Investigators believe her kidnapping was not random. They believe it was designed as a message, directed not at Valeria, who had no personal connection to the extortion operation, who knew nothing about it, who had done nothing except exist in proximity to someone who had failed to pay. The people responsible were never identified. There is a particular kind of violence in cases like this one. Not only the violence of the act itself, the violence of the logic behind it. The logic that says a person has value only as a mechanism of leverage, that a life is a tool for sending a message to someone else, that the arithmetic of pressure and consequence is more important than the arithmetic of a 22-year-old woman's life, her timeline on the inside back cover of her notebook, her plans, her mother's food going cold on the stove. That logic was never interrupted. The people who operated by it were never held to account. They are, in all probability, still operating by it. Some disappearances are random, others are planned. Valeria Torres was never the intended target.